A church is more than just a building, more than just a sanctuary. A church is a family of people, people of faith who gather to share worship, to share fellowship, to share their time and talents to improve their community. It's a place where everyone is welcome, where all of God's creatures have a home. 60 years ago, there was a dream to begin a church in Ardmore that would be such a place. And what started as an artist's rendering has now come to life at Highland Presbyterian Church. Highland really has its roots here, at First Presbyterian Church in downtown Winston-Salem. The year was 1949. First Church wanted to start a new congregation to serve the neighborhood of Ardmore, which was growing with the expansion of Baptist Hospital, and they asked for volunteers.
My hand went up first.
For Jane Dwiggins, the decision was easy.
I was very happy at First Church, but I loved the idea of having a church in Ardmore. My children was like 13, 16, and it would be nice to have a church here for them to grow up with their friends. And I was excited about having a church in Ardmore.
Archie Walker was working as an attorney for Wachovia Bank.
They were interested in organizing a new church, and I wanted to cooperate. And it was convenient for me to do that because I lived out there in the area.
I thought it would be a smaller group and more friendly, and we lived near it, where the Highland was being built.
My family moved to Winston-Salem the summer I was 11. And when we got to Winston-Salem, of course, the first thing Mother looked for was a Presbyterian church. And there was no Presbyterian church out in the Ardmore area, so we started downtown. Dr. Lake was the minister, and I went to Sunday school down there. Tony Blair's wife, Jessie, was my Sunday school teacher. I'll never forget that. And of course, you had to dress up. You had to wear a hat and gloves every Sunday school and church.
Bill and Rosita Thacker came to First Presbyterian as newlyweds in 1941. For them, it was a difficult decision to leave First Church and start a new congregation.
First Church actually encouraged those of us, particularly living in the area, in the Ardmore section of Winston-Salem, to join with this group, to establish a new congregation in Ardmore. And Rosita and I were living reasonably close to the present location of Highland at the time, and I felt some obligation, really, to go and be a part of this group, to establish a new congregation in another area of town.
I didn't want to leave. Bill says, well, I tell you, I'll go ahead and you just stay here, and then when it gets all started, I'll come back. But a little bit later, I decided it was the thing for me to do. And there were so many opportunities to serve in a new church that was just beginning. And I felt like I had a few things to offer. I sang in the choir, sometimes was a soloist, and I felt the choir needed me.
Buddy Robinson was working for the railroad. Jean was working for the Girl Scouts.
I was happy at First Church. I was singing in the choir and getting to know people down there. But then they began telling us about organizing a new church, and that they especially would love for young families to come out and support it and build on with it. And since we were getting married about that time, we felt like that would be a good spot for us. And as we got to know people, we realized we were in an age group where others were in the same, had the same interest as we had, and we all were married, you know, more or less in the same time frame. And we thought it would just be a good place for us to start out.
And so Highland Presbyterian was born, with 136 charter members, most of them coming from First Presbyterian. Initially, they met in the basement of First Presbyterian. Their first meeting was on Thanksgiving morning, 1949.
And on that first meeting date, it was a very appropriate time. Being Thanksgiving, we were all thankful for what had been accomplished, the erection of the educational building and the basement level of the what was then the assembly room. And it was an exhilarating experience.
And they had a stage, and we had church downstairs in that big room while the main church was going on upstairs.
It was hard to think about the future because there was so much to do. But even with all the work ahead, it was an exciting time.
Yeah, we thought it was. George Mose really started the movement before Union Lake came there. George was the pastor, and he had a philosophy that when a church got a certain size, it ought to start colonizing in order to involve more people in activities of the church. And so he sort of started the movement, and it grew, and bought some land where the church now is, and began to develop the program.
It was fun down there. We were close, and yet it was real nice, and we were just thoroughly enjoyed George Staples, who was our minister at the time. He was just such a fun guy. So we enjoyed going to church and being with the whole crowd, and everybody there was just so friendly and made you feel like this is just a wonderful place. And there was a lot of little things that would happen that were just fun. But it was always remembered as something, you just got to be there. You can't miss church, and that's the way it was.
George Staples was the first minister.
George was a wonderful speaker, a minister, and we all, you know, got a lot from his services. And we just enjoyed very much just being a group. It was a small room, and it was usually full. And when the services were over, we stayed a good long while just to catch up on everybody's news of the week. And it was just a nice, happy family time.
George was a good friend to the members as well as their minister.
He especially liked to drop in on Saturday nights about 10 o'clock for the wrestling matches. And that was, and if he missed our place, he would hit another place. But he always made his rounds because he was a single man and just enjoyed, you know, knowing people. We had groups that would get together with him and just play games, whatever, just have fun together because we were all young.
Land had already been purchased on Cloverdale Avenue in Ardmore, which at the time was the far outskirts of the city, and groundbreaking for the new church began. As construction got underway, Highland members met at the Smokehouse Restaurant on Stratford Road and would always drive by to check on their new home.
We watched it from the time they started it. We would check in every week or so and see what the progress was, and it was really fun to see it all completed.
The first phase was the 3-story education building, completed in 1950. The next step was the main sanctuary, beginning with the basement, and that's where Sunday school and services were held.
When we moved out to our fellowship hall at Highland, you know, when we were able to build that much, we were able to raise all these babies that we had all had by then and just have a good family time. It was like one big family, really.
But we eventually built the building that you see now, if you can envision it, without the sanctuary on top. It was the T with the educational classrooms and that sort of thing on the back as they are now. And the classrooms on the bottom floor was an open area. It was the activity building of the day. and that's where we met for meals and worship and that sort of thing. As I mentioned before, where the gathering steps are, the gathering area was the original stage from where the choir sang and the preacher preached.
We had prayer meeting, and I love prayer meeting in that church. We had prayer meeting so many years. It was great. And it was like a get-together, like a family get-together after the service every time. It was really nice.
We did not want to go home. We would have church and downstairs, and then we'd all just, nobody would want to leave. We just stand out there and visit and have such a good time. And Wednesday night especially, we had a Wednesday night supper that was fun. And I don't think anybody that was a member of the church would miss that, because it was just such a good, fun evening. And it just made you feel such a wonderful cooperation with everybody.
By now, the Highland congregation had swelled to 400 members, and the fellowship hall was a truly multi-purpose room. Rosita Thacker hand-painted a shuffleboard court on the linoleum floor.
That's right. That was the dining room, the shuffleboard room, the Boy Scouts room.
And back then, the church members did a lot of the work themselves. Gary Symes remembers mowing the lawn with his father.
That was Saturday morning. We'd get up, come up to the church, and mow the grass. I guess I was helping him more than doing anything else, but that was one of my earliest memories.
We had a lot of work days back then when we started with, where the men would have to get out and really work in the yard and spread fertilizer and put grass seed out and do all this kind of stuff. And it just seemed so funny to me, because I was just a clerk, and yet I would be spreading fertilizer with Tully Blair, who owned Security Life, and Red Benton, who was head of the McLean Trucking. And I couldn't believe my fortune in life at the time, because I was with some extremely nice people.
I guess Tully Blair was one of them that you always think about. He was quite a speaker, and he was one of the leaders in getting the sanctuary built. Ken Symes used to do a lot of work of painting the rooms and making toys for the nursery and a number of things like that.
It was exciting to see it go up. We'd go look at it week after week to see it. And I remember helping make draperies for the ladies' parlor, and we went down there and took a percolator and sandwiches and stayed all day long and sewed, because we didn't have money then to buy everything. We did everything we could to make money, sold papers and coat hangers and things like that.
When we had the educational building built, those dormers are on the top, and he and several other gentlemen painted them. We back then did a lot instead of hiring it out. And I wanted so bad to crawl out of that upper dormer window and get on that ladder that they had tied off to the roof and paint with them, but he would not let me do that. I was very disappointed.
Gene Kirkman asked me if I could fix a sound system for him. And so I got up over above the ceiling, cut holes for 6 speakers up there, and ran the microphone cable down through the columns, the empty columns right by the lectern and the pulpit, and put the microphones down there. And the funny thing, the part compared with what the prices are today, I had Bill Ligon to buy through his electric company all of the amplifier and the tape recorder and microphones and wire and stuff. And would you guess it cost less than $500 at that time? So the whole system cost less than $500.
In early 1953, the pledge drive began to raise the money to build the sanctuary. The budget was $150,000. The theme, once in a lifetime. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build something that would surpass their imagination. A sturdy place where they could glorify God through scripture and music. A sanctuary that would inspire and endure for generations. With the money raised, the work began.
I was on the building committee for the sanctuary, and I'll tell you about one little incident. George Staple calls me one day, and they were getting ready to put in the cornerstone, and he says, "Are you any good with a trowel?" And you know, in those days we did all kind of projects. I didn't know. I hesitated a minute because I didn't know what we were getting into, but I had used a trowel a little bit. So anyway, I told him, "Yeah, I've used a trowel a little bit." He says, "Well, I think you can manage this job. I just want you to put in the final little cornerstone there." And so we did. And we must have done a pretty fair job because it's still there.
I remember going in before there were any pews, when it was just a big empty room. I guess we used to go up there and peer in it, you know, and look in it when we were doing other things, like when we were there for Bible school maybe. But it was amazing.
And everyone remembers the day they tried to put up the steeple.
But I can remember that like it's yesterday, because the crane got up there and was putting the steeple up, and then all of a sudden it looked like a part of the crane just kind of buckled or something, and the whole steeple then just fell over and just looked like that's it. We just gonna have to order a brand new one, but they got it all fixed, and it was a mess for a few days, but they did get it up and got the cross on top of it then, and that was it. So, but I do remember that it looked like just something buckled in the big crane that was handling it, and it just kept going. It just fell flat. It was awful. Then they put it back up, and they finally got it all set and everything, so we knew that we'd come home, so it was great.
George Staples donated the gold cross that is still the center focus of the sanctuary. Red Benton gave the organ, and finally, in May of 1956, the first service was held in the new sanctuary.
It was just beautiful, and we just felt so proud of it. And
I just remember thinking that it was special because it was ours, that we had watched it go up.
We were proud of it, and we were proud to have accomplished that.
The first few times we couldn't believe it, that this had been done, and this group of people had built such a beautiful place to worship. When we first went into the sanctuary, it was just such a quiet place for us to be, and something to remember for years to come, that we just were unable to take it all in. It was just too great.
I think the biggest thing was to see it all put together, that it had taken such a long time, all these stages, and then all of a sudden you walk in and it's done. It's amazing.
Gary Symes returned from military service in Korea to a completed sanctuary and couldn't believe his eyes.
Because I had left it with that great big open space downstairs covered by this flat tar paper roof, and then you open the doors and walk into this gorgeous sanctuary. It was rather astonishing that it was really the wow factor, that, my goodness, what have they done since I've been gone? It was just absolutely glorious.
The years that followed saw Highland Presbyterian grow both in numbers and in activities. Circles were formed, scout troops were organized, and youth groups were started.
Buddy and Gene Robinson were our advisors. We had a senior beach trip and went down to Myrtle Beach, and I'll never forget. The girls had to stay in one house, and the boys stayed 2 miles down the beach in another house. But they did let us get together on the beach.
The choir could now raise a joyful noise to the sounds of a pipe organ instead of just a piano. And Sunday school became a larger part of church life as the number of children continued to grow. And there were incentives to attend Sunday school.
Bob Blair was Tully Blair's, they were both charter members. Tully was president of Security Life and Trust, and Bob was his brother, also a vice president, and Bob was a Sunday school teacher. Middle school, Bob had an airplane, four-place airplane. At the beginning of the year, he said for the three people who had perfect attendance at the end of the Sunday school year, we were going to go on an airplane ride. I plugged into that big time, and I did not miss one Sunday. I wouldn't have anyway, because my parents made sure I was going to be there anyhow. But so at the end of the Sunday school year, I had perfect attendance, and so I got to sit next to him. And we took the plane up, and he let me fly. And of course, the first thing I did was grab the wheel and turn the plane right up on its wing. Scared him to death. He took it back, and I don't think he ever offered that again.
Through it all, lasting friendships were forged. And even now, friendly is the word most often used to describe Highland Presbyterian to those who've never been here.
Without fail, every new member class, as an officer that I've listened to people come in, friendliness. The very first word they will utter is they felt that warm feeling of being welcomed. And I've heard that for the 60 years.